This is The Rundown, your weekly news in review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. Happy Friday. It is June 5th. You are listening to The Rundown here, streaming live on YouTube and available on 88.5 NEPM. Our Rundowners this week, Greg Sukiennik, the news editor of the Berkshire Eagle, G. Michael Dobbs of Focus Springfield, and Elizabeth Román, executive editor for news at NEPM, and you can check them out on YouTube wearing their very smart fedoras. If you have thoughts, email therundown@nepm.org. And coming up later, our panel's thoughts on General Electric's proposed plan to clean up PCBs in the Housatonic River. License plates readers in use in Agawam are being given a second thought after some public complaints. Plus, a look at how several Hampden County communities have recovered 15 years after the devastating 2011 tornado. But first, something from the Berkshire Eagle. As sewage sludge disposal options narrow, local officials warn that tons of it will have nowhere to go, aka the hidden reason the cost of taking care of your business is getting more expensive. Yes, I went there. This is Izzy Bryers reporting from the Berkshire Eagle, quoting, "Every day, Berkshire County's wastewater treatment plants produce tons of sewage sludge that must go somewhere, to an incinerator, a landfill, or less commonly now, into land as fertilizer. But those disposal options are narrowing. Environmental concerns have made the fertilizer options less attractive, and fewer places like landfills accept it. This is driving up costs for treatment plants, which inevitably means residents are going to bear the brunt of that." Greg Sukiennik, what stands out to you here in Izzy's reporting?
First of all, it was an excellent job by Izzy. What stands out to me, perhaps, is some of the underlying reasons for the costs. You would think, oh, trucking, or labor. No, the contamination in the waste stream. We're talking about the PFAS forever chemicals, like one might find on a nonstick pan, or even heavy metals. You know, it's like the contamination is. I mean, because previously, you know, a lot of this stuff was used sort of, I guess, once pasteurized or something as compost or sort of top cover.
Yeah, there's
which blows my mind as well, but that's another.
But there's a complex process of making this palatable for compost.
Exactly. But when you have contamination in that, that suddenly becomes unusable, because then now you're introducing those things potentially into the food stream. Yeah. And so, you know, and removing contaminants, as we'll learn later in the show, is expensive. So, and those costs are borne by, you know, some small towns in northern Berkshire County, where, you know, there's, you know, the ratepayer is the person who always has to pay for something like this, and the water or sewer. I mean, that's the way those are set up. They're supposed to rely upon, you know, it's supposed to be self-sustaining. But, you know, there's a point where that's no longer economical for these communities, and they're really struggling to try to find solutions.
You hit on PFAS, which they're these so-called forever chemicals. They include 14,000 man-made chemicals used in everyday products, ranging from cookware, cosmetics, clothing, kids' toys, and bedding. There's a push to a state bill that would have them removed have those items removed from children's products. It would give 5 years for that to happen. We saw back in a few years ago, the governor passed a law that said these PFAS can no longer be in firefighting materials, the turnout gear that firefighters wear.
And the foam.
Yes. Because of the potential that these cause cancer.
Right. I mean, and our nearby listeners in Vermont, southern Vermont, know about this because, you know, Pownell and Bennington had to deal with losing their water sources because PFAS got into their wells.
And we've talked about that here elsewhere in Western Massachusetts. Maine and Connecticut have banned land application of wastewater sludge because of the PFAS concerns. There's pressure building in Massachusetts, Elizabeth, to do the same. Do you think we might see that happen here in Massachusetts?
I honestly, I think so. We there was a lawmaker hearing a couple months ago that Phil Bishop, one of our NEPM reporters, he listened in on, and I actually wrote down the quote from a young farmer from Sheffield that spoke up against it and in favor of the ban, which was it's making it difficult for generational transition of farms. The fact that younger farmers are very conscious of what's going in their fertilizer, of what they're growing, and how expensive it is to test soil in order to find out if farmers before them used this sludge as a fertilizer. So the idea that young people who want to get into farming, into agriculture, are nervous to buy small family farms because they're afraid of what's going to grow out of there and what they're going to be feeding people. It's an interesting thing that maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago people weren't thinking about when they were using this product as a fertilizer.
Right, because these chemicals, it wasn't like initially, well, as far as we know, companies didn't know that there was potentially harmful things in them, but now they're used in so many different things. Izzy Briers pointed out this has some broader implications, right, well beyond the Berkshires, lots of communities. Everybody has wastewater treatment plants, and everyone needs their sludge to go somewhere. I was really surprised, Mike Dobbs, at the extent to which this material is trucked elsewhere for disposal and incineration. Izzy Briers pointed out a 2024 study commissioned by the State Department of Environmental Protection projected that by 2028, at least 12,000 dry tons of sludge would have no clear disposal outlet given the current management conditions. What do you think?
Well, let's take a look at the problems that all municipalities have had in the last 20 years about regular old garbage, the stuff that we throw out. So we've closed landfills, and now we have transfer stations where our garbage is put onto trucks and it's brought somewhere. And it's sort of like, if it's out of our view, it's out of our mind. There's this assumption that somehow the authorities, the government, is taking care of these things. And the answer really is, no, we're not. We're not thinking ahead enough. And yes, we have made a lot of efforts in terms of things like recycling to take things out of the waste stream. But again, people don't seem to realize that basically recycled materials that are successfully recycled are a very, very small percentage of what you're putting in your recycle bin. So, this is not surprising. We kick these cans down the road all the time. And unfortunately now, there comes a time where you have to pay. You have to figure out a solution.
Well, WBUR, as I alluded to earlier, reported Thursday that there's legislation on Beacon Hill that would give manufacturers up to 5 years to remove the chemicals from children's products sold in the state. That was shocking to me as a parent to recognize that these materials, these PFAS, are in some of the things that your kids might be snuggling with or wearing, playing with. What do you think?
Putting in their mouths.
Yes, exactly. Sure. What do you think about the potential of the legislature weighing in on this specific to kids? We said they did it for firefighters.
Well, I think that everything is all about implementation. Whatever they propose, the implementation has to be something that's actually realistic. And you should be able to get the industry involved behind it. And I don't know the answer to that question. And we may not know that until we actually see these bills come through the system.
Go ahead, Liz.
And it's a complex issue because Izzy, such a great job by Izzy on this article. I was enthralled. The last line I think she has is like, well, we all need water, right? We all use water. So it's so complicated because it's like as a consumer, as a person who uses water, I don't think about it being divided into sludge, dry product, and wet product, and where my clean water is being recycled from. And they tell you like, don't use that much water and don't get in a long shower. But those things actually have a cost associated with them. They have a cost to your health and they have a cost to our, to our finances as well. So I see that legislation passing, particularly the one with children.
The DEP is testing technologies to destroy PFAS and sludge, and it has a $2.9 million pilot project measuring how well various methods work. So we'll see. Obviously, lots more to come on this topic, and we'll keep following it here on the Rundown. Next headline: after residents raise concerns, Agawam counselors question new license plate cameras. This is reporting by a freelancer for the Springfield Republican newspaper, Michael Ballway, quoting, "Somewhere in Agawam, up to 6 cameras are watching and recording the license plates of every car that drives by. City councilors have spent the last month trying to find out where that information goes. City Councilor Thomas Hendrickson recently told the Republican, quote, "I recognize that flock cameras have played a role in solving crimes and protecting public safety. But I have serious concerns regarding the invasion of privacy that is occurring. People deserve to be able to go out in public without having their movements tracked by the government and by big tech companies." The story goes on to say, though, the cameras are made by Flock Safety, a police technology company. The council's skepticism comes about 9 months after city councilors themselves, including Hendritzig, unanimously approved the funds for this project. But in comments in recent meetings, city councilors have said there wasn't enough public debate on license plate readers before the town agreed to install them. Mike Dobbs.
Okay, so there is now a movement in Massachusetts. There's a website for an anti-flocking. Hey, I pronounced that correctly, folks. I don't want Carrie to get into trouble here. An anti-flocking effort, and it is talking about the fact that this technology is an AI technology, that it's gathering this information, and people are very concerned about it. What I think is interesting about this is I'm sure that when the Agawam Council approved it, what was it, 9 months ago? 9 months ago, we weren't quite in our AI, what the hell is happening and how is this going to affect us mode in this country, which is now growing. So I would ask the counselors, what kind of contract do you have? What does the contract specify? Why did you agree to it if you're not sure where this information goes to?
And City Council is kind of saying for its part, well, we need to talk to the police chief, which there's been a little bit of, sounds like from the way the paper reported it, not a ton of communication going on there. The mayor has stepped up and shared his comments, which I'll share in a second. But I wanted to say first that, Flock's CEO, Garrett Langley, told Forbes magazine in 2025, its cameras help solve an estimated 1 million crimes in the United States. And he predicts that in less than 10 years, Flock cameras, airborne and fixed, will eradicate almost all crime in the U.S. He acknowledges that programs to boost youth employment and cut recidivism might help. Now, for the mayor's part in Agawam, Christopher Jack Johnson said, quote, "These are deployed on public roads and you are traveling on a public way. How is that invading anyone's privacy?" Thoughts on that, Greg Sukiennik?
The civil rights implications are astonishing in all this. And it's interesting to hear a CEO basically quote the plot of RoboCop.
I was going to say, that's RoboCop.
But, big ups to Officer Murphy. Let's think about why people go to Agawam. They go to Six Flags, right? Or Rocky's Ace Hardware. But if you're parking for the Big E. But you don't expect that your trip to a theme park is going to result in the government having a snapshot of your license plate and an idea of where you were going and when you were going. And we solved plenty of crimes without using this technology before. I just think it feels.
To your
feels
point,
like the legislature really needs to step up here, and apparently there's a move afoot in the bill, some bills that might start to address some of this.
Yeah, the House passed a version of a privacy bill yesterday. The Senate had passed one earlier this year, so now those two sides will have to be duked out. And I have questions about whether that bill, if it becomes law, will kind of be a foot in the door. But the ACLU of Massachusetts has started a campaign called Get the Flock Out, making it very clear where the organization stands on this one. The ACLU claims that the police are engaging in mass surveillance via these systems, that license plates readers are analogous to cell phone tracking, which the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruled in 2014, that police are required to obtain a search warrant to access cell phone tracking data. So again, ACLU drawing that line here. Yeah. Liz, what's top of mind for you on this one?
I mean, I think I agree with Mike that this idea of 9 months ago when they were looking at it, they should have asked a lot more questions, and now they're saying there wasn't enough public input. Isn't it their job to bring people forward and give an opportunity for a hearing before they made this decision? Trying to be sympathetic to them because, again, we are in sort of like this increasing Orwellian society where all of our movements are being tracked all of the time, and why is this any different? But I think it's the lack of transparency. People don't even know what streets these are on. So they're just randomly going through their little town every day, and they have no idea where they're being monitored. And that's just not okay. We can't keep allowing this in incremental, steps of giving away our freedoms and giving away our privacy, even if it is for, the great cause of solving a hit and run, which is what the Michael said in the story, right? And that's important, but I just feel like people should know. People should know where these things are, and they should be able to have some autonomy when they live in the town and they pay taxes there.
I think it'll be important to hear from Agawam exactly where this data is going and who it's being shared with, because as I read it, Flock allows each municipality that signs on to these contracts, they spent about $58,000 of casino mitigation fund money to cover the cost of this technology. But it's up to local municipalities to choose, are we just keeping this in-house? Are we sharing it with the larger flock system, which could mean that federal authorities could have access to this information. So the ACLU is concerned, does this then become an issue where federal agents, ICE perhaps, are seeing these license plates and tracking them to individuals in very specific locations? So big questions: who stores the images and data from Agawam cameras, and whether anyone outside of the police department is having access to this. Next steps: Agawam City Council intends to discuss this again. June 15th, there is a meeting, and they've invited the police chief, Eric Gillis, to come and attend and share more information. So I'm sure there'll be more to come on this one. And still ahead, here on the Rundown, our panel discusses General Electric's plan to clean up PCBs in the Housatonic River, because that's General Electric's next stage is now public. The public can also weigh in. Plus, reflecting 15 years after a tornado hit Hampden County. You're listening to the Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM and streaming on YouTube. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. Still talking about the last segment. I'm joined again by Greg Sukiennik, G. Michael Dobbs, and Elizabeth Román. Let's get back into it. We'll start with reporting from you this week, Greg. General Electric outlines its final rest of river cleanup proposal for the Housatonic River. Obviously continuing coverage here for the Berkshire Eagle and on the Rundown. And as you wrote about it this week, this pertains to the chemical legacy of power transformer manufacturing in Pittsfield. I love how you took something so broad and made it so succinct. Give us some more backstory.
Thanks. My editor said the same thing, by the way, so thank you. So we're talking about Reach 5A. We're talking about like the first 5 miles of like a 28-mile process of pulling, physically removing, not all, but some
the agreed
PCBs,
upon
the agreed upon level of
portion.
PCBs from the Housatonic River. So we're talking about 5 miles over 5 years, like a mile a year. We're talking about removing about 200,000 cubic yards of sediment. That's enough to fill 34 football fields a foot deep.
Wow.
Or 65,000 walruses. I looked it up. That's also, and then restoring the river back to its, to try to prevent erosion, so that the armored cap that they put in will actually, behave as intended. It's a lot of the more things change, the more things stay the same. And the more things change parts are important. That we're at this point now, we're finally in public comment for something that's been brewing for decades, literally. Mm-hmm. That we've taken some cues from the first 2 miles of remediation of the east branch of the Housatonic River, which was far more armored with stone, and decided we're not going to do that. But the more things stay the same. We still have a landfill that most residents in Lee do not want. And we still have this sort of the direct interaction that people have with the river and with PCBs in ways that they didn't count on. I'll have a story coming up this weekend about some folks in a neighborhood near Pomeroy Avenue, where near Herberg Middle School, where the hearing was held on Wednesday. And so one of those neighbors has a proposal, where the government and GE asked to put an airborne monitoring station in their yard. well, what does this mean for me? Do I need a lawyer? What does this mean for the value of my property? And one of the other neighbors has a 4.5-year-old kid, and twins due in a couple months.
Yep. And people have long been concerned about the suspected link to cancer.
Sure. I mean, the links to cancer, it was banned as a probable cause of cancer in 1979. And EPA's solution is very much based upon sort of direct access to PCBs as a eating fish, eating waterfowl, mucking about in the river and its floodplains. But people are concerned about airborne exposure.
And this is a massive land. You
Yes.
point out 1,594 pages of environmental science, regulatory compliance, and really specific detail.
It's granular.
On how this is going to be cleaned up. And so people now have kind of between now and August to digest. They can make public comments to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. But there were a couple of meetings this week that I know you were at. There's been criticism of the plan, especially with folks in Lee who are very upset about a low-level PCB contamination dump being there in that community as part of this proposed plan. What did you hear from people at the meeting this week?
There's going to be less truck traffic than would have been. One of the changes that came about is GE's agreement to use far more rail in transporting sediments to this landfill or out of the area if they're a higher level of sediment, contaminated sediment, that is. People are still concerned about the potential for airborne exposure. But I think there's also kind of an undercurrent of some folks recognize that this isn't perfect, but they'd like it to get going because we have been talking about this. Mm-hmm. I mean, we first found PCBs, we were first talking about an oil sheen on the east branch of the Housatonic River in the 1970s.
Right.
And so this goes back.
And while we're zooming in on this portion of the Housatonic River in the Berkshires, I think it's important to keep in mind that the Housatonic River runs 150 miles through western Massachusetts into western Connecticut and out to the Long Island Sound.
And one of the more outspoken folks at the Citizens Coordinating Committee or Citizens Coordinating Council meeting is a woman from Connecticut, actually. Her name is Judy Herkimer. She's part of I forget the acronym of the group she's from. And she's,
environmental group.
Yeah, environmental group. And she's like one of the more persistent critics of the way this is happening. And there are still folks who say, why are we dumping this stuff? We should be treating this stuff at the source. There's disagreement over how those treatment options would work and whether they would actually cause more climate, damage than they would solve.
Yep.
So,
Liz, Mike, thoughts on this?
No, I mean, we were talking off camera about how this has been happening since literally before I was born. This issue has been going on. When I started here, Nancy Eve Cohen, who was a reporter here for many years, she'd been covering it for years as well. And it's the back and forth. So I think the idea that there may be some forward movement, even if it's not exactly what they're looking for, hopeful, but will it happen in my lifetime? I don't know that it will, honestly.
Yeah, it's been a very long time coming, and it also brings up another issue, which is in other New England mill towns, what kind of contamination is there that we may not be completely aware of, or if authorities are aware of, maybe they're not doing anything with it. Let's face it, this area was a manufacturing hub. Chemicals were used, and there may be a lot of sleeping giants out there.
Well, and for me, we just talked about PFAS earlier in the show, those so-called forever chemicals, which are still being very widely used. So for me, it's about asking questions about whether benefits of a product and the harms are in line with one another. For me, I'm thinking PFAS, maybe the government should start requiring labels on anything that has PFAS in it, cosmetics, kids' toys, the things that we talked about in the previous segment. Any final thoughts here, Greg?
It's hard to sum up something this big with a one little snippet, but I guess I'll go back to the lead of that story about General Electric, made the modern Pittsfield, and its departure from Pittsfield also made the modern Pittsfield, but without the power transformer manufacturing, Pittsfield isn't the Pittsfield we know. But then again, without that, without the legacy of that, Pittsfield also isn't the Pittsfield we know. And so, in a lot of ways, this is Pittsfield and the Berkshires coming to grips with that legacy and trying to figure out how to move forward.
And people can comment on this proposed plan from General Electric directly to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency through August 10th. June 3rd was the 15th anniversary of a tornado that struck Springfield, and several surrounding communities. Monday marked 15 years, as I said, and it was a powerful EF3 tornado that ripped through Hampden County. EF3 means winds of 136 to 165 miles an hour in sort of 3-second gusts. There were 3 people who died and nearly 200 were injured, according to the Boston Globe. The storm left a 39-mile path of wreckage, first in Westfield, wended through 9 other communities, and ended in Sturbridge. The damage was especially severe in Springfield, where buildings and homes were leveled over a path of several miles. And Mike Dobbs, you were among those who were impacted by this.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us, you focused and you wrote about it this week.
Yeah, I wrote about it in the column that I put up on Medium, and my thrust of the column was the irony of all this is that we went through something terrible. We did get something good out of it. In my neighborhood of Maple High Six Corners, for instance, we got a new school. Now, the problem is we've needed a new school there for probably 25, 30 years. And it took a tornado to get us a new school. But what I was also concerned about is with climate change, with changes in the insurance industry, what is our status now across this country? And what is our status with FEMA? Does FEMA have the kind of money that it needs? Is there the focus to provide help for communities? I mean, the tornado here was a freakish weather event. But what isn't freakish is the amount of hurricanes that are now hitting the country, the amount of wildfires that we've got, and especially in the Midwest, the amount of tornadoes. And I would submit that the Trump administration has put a fairly low priority on a lot of this kind of funding to rebuild. In many ways, we were lucky. We did not have the loss of life that frequently accompanies these events. But on the other hand, I wonder about the future.
And it was a big deal to get money out of FEMA. The city of Springfield sued several times on appeal, ultimately about $39 million in total coming from FEMA. I think it was $90 million overall in general between state, federal, and local funds that went to just cleanup of public funds. That doesn't count homeowners like you and so many others, Mike, who appeal to private insurance companies to get funds to help them with that process. Liz, you were reporting on that day. What do you remember?
Yeah, I was a reporter at the Republican, and they sent me out to East Forest Park because there was a microburst that had happened or was going to happen. And I got there, I had this little Honda Civic. I remember it was like a 1994 car, and I drove over and you could feel the wind. And when I got there, I got out and had my little notebook. I was ready to do interviews, and they police rushed us all into a church, and we went into this basement, and then you could hear the sound of trees like breaking. You could hear the creaking sound of trees just falling on top of houses, and it was very quick. It wasn't something that lasted more than, I don't know, I was in that basement maybe 10-15 minutes. We came out and it was complete destruction. I mean, it was that particular neighborhood, Island Pond Road, had such beautiful, gorgeous old trees, and they were just gone. People were just looking in disbelief. I didn't know how to approach people to ask them, as their house had a giant tree in the middle of it. Like, how do you interview people? I feel like I was too young, and I don't know that I did that great of a job, but it will live in my memory forever. I'll never forget that. It looked like a scene out of a movie.
You did the best that you could at the time, right? And there's been, Greg.
Oh, I just remember I don't have a direct connection to this, but I was living in Connecticut at the time, and I remember just watching the footage of the tornado crossing, was it the
I-91?
I-91 and crossing the bridge, and I just backed that up and watched that over and over again, like it
in
was
disbelief,
like it was a Josh Allen Buffalo Bills sports highlight, because how did that happen? Did this really happen in Western Mass? I mean, I know the tornadoes can happen in Western Mass. They're still relatively rare in my experience, but I mean, then tuning in later, you realize that the line of destruction that it carved, you could see it from space. That's a serious tornado.
And from the historical standpoint, Memorial Day, May 29th, 1995, 3 people died and 24 people were injured, an estimated $25 million in damage in Great Barrington, when an F4 tornado struck that area, which means, wind burst gusts 166 to 200 miles per hour.
That still had a bit of an impact on us, decades later. In 2024, in December, when the Butternut wildfire happened, the mountain where the fire was burning, it became difficult for firefighters to actually get through there and try to deal with the fire, because a lot of the trees that were felled by the tornado were still lying where they stand. It's a steep mountaintop, not the kind of thing you can just easily, clean up. And so that damage was still there and in the way.
Yeah. Mike, one of the things that stood out to me in your piece, you pointed out there are many things to talk about right now. The economy, government decisions, things that you may or may not agree with that government are doing, wars. But for you, in the face of this, it's still important to reflect on this weather event from 15 years ago.
Yeah, because we're talking about if you believe that government is there to help us, to take care of us, then you understand the mission of something like FEMA. But when the government does not fund FEMA properly, or when they construct FEMA in a way that is difficult for people to get relief, this is as big an issue as any others that we're facing right now. And yes, we're facing a lot of substantive issues.
And for its part, FEMA has said in May it announced $175 million in post-disaster funding for public assistance and hazard mitigation, a grant program that the Trump administration is making readily available. But as we reflect on this one in this region, certainly still heavy on hearts and minds here in Western Massachusetts, and our thoughts go out to those families who lost people in this devastating event. You have been listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. My thanks to today's panel, Greg Sukiennik, Mike Dobbs, and Elizabeth Román. Go out there and have a fantastic Friday, everybody. See you here next week.